Today on page 121, we're going to take a look at the Fifth Frontier War. This is an era of Traveller that's near and dear to my heart because the Fifth Frontier War started right after I got into Traveller. I started playing Traveller in March of 81, and the Fifth Frontier War is officially announced in Traveller lore. Issue 9, the war issue of Journal of Traveller's Aid Society, which was a whopping $4 because it was deluxe issue. And this was copyright 1981. Where is it? It's so hard to find. Copyright 1981. And we got our first announcement of it. There were some hints about, there's the announcement right here, flash, flash, flash. That's the announcement of the Fifth Frontier War. There were some hints about it because the Fifth Frontier War box set was on the horizon. But I was not the deep Traveller guy yet in our group. That belonged to the guy who introduced me to Traveller and was our first GM. He was the one that was running our campaign during a good chunk of the Fifth Frontier War, and he had the Fifth Frontier War box set and such. So I remember playing that with him and discussing the Fifth Frontier War and all that was going on. And the Fifth Frontier War lasted quite a bit of time. Issue 9 of Journal of Traveller's Aid Society, all the way to issue 22. This issue is published in 1985, and it was only a few issues before it would go over to become Challenge Magazine. Here we get the announcement of the armistice being signed and everything with the Zodani consulate. So it's pretty interesting that it spanned essentially 4 years in Traveller lore. That's significant because it was the first couple of years that I was involved with Traveller. So I came in right with the Fifth Frontier War. And that's important because that was my baby. We knew about it. We were reading about it. I played the board game. We were doing an active duty campaign for a while during that time, where we were the command crew of a vessel that was fighting Zodani in the Spinward Marches during the Fifth Frontier War. I don't remember exactly where we were in the marches. I don't remember a lot of details about it. I don't even remember the name of the ship, unfortunately, and I'm sure all that lore is unfortunately long gone. But the interesting thing for me was that the Fifth Frontier War was happening. And the important thing there is the Fifth Frontier War was happening. It was nothing we could really influence per se. There were a lot of articles in the Journal of Traveller's Aid Society, some other sources, a lot of adventures set in and around the Spinward Marches during this time, and all of them had kind of a peripheral effect from the war, but none of them affected the war itself. The course of the war was written by the authors of these articles and came forward as it developed through them, and the players had no real input into it, which was fine because that's how stuff was done at the time. Not unlike the Rebellion, which would be a few years later in Traveller, which should start in 1987 with Mega Traveller, or even the Greyhawk Wars in 89, 90, right around in there. The players had no real agency in these events. They were just events that happened and the players had to deal with. And that's all well and good. Well, Mongoose is picking up the Fifth Frontier War, supposedly at the end of this month. But they've already kicked it off with Whispers on the Abyss. This is an adventure that I'm not going to go through because it's an adventure. I don't want to do any spoilers. But the important thing there is this is the kickoff of the Fifth Frontier War. And that's not giving up anything. You know that from the early releases from Mongoose. But the important thing is it's starting, and in this book, Mongoose is vowing there will be players that will be able to affect the course of the war. Some of the things you do will change this or that, and they recommend in this book that a lot of what is already published about the Fifth Frontier War be treated more or less as war games and such, and not set in stone. So they're not throwing this stuff out, but they're just looking to kind of modernize it and make it current players, which I'm really excited about. I love the idea of players actually impacting the effect of the war. Even a crew of a free trader having some kind of impact on the war is pretty neat. And that's something that really wasn't there. I love the Fifth Frontier War. It was my earliest Traveller thing. I remember buying this issue when it was new, and I really enjoyed this issue, but I didn't really know anything about the Imperium yet. I was still learning. And as everybody knows, when you get into Traveller, there's a steep learning curve. especially in the 80s when you could only go through magazines to find information, magazines or official releases. So the fact that Mongoose is kicking off the Fifth Frontier War and they're promising that players will be able to drive some of the events of the Fifth Frontier War is pretty exciting. This adventure by the always capable Martin Doherty gives us a nice insight into what's happening, how the war is building, how we find out the war is building, and it's all part of the story of Whispers on the Abyss. I am not going to go through this. I really enjoyed this adventure. I'm very excited that it's kicking off the Fifth Frontier War. I have it on PDF now. That's all I bought it, but I may go back and get this in hard edition. I'm pretty excited that this is the beginning of the Fifth Frontier War, and the way that they did this. For one thing, Mongoose has departed a little bit from some of their other stuff in that they give us a lot of NPCs in this adventure. And this is actually a mini campaign. This is more than an adventure. It's about 130 pages, so it's more than just an adventure. It's a mini campaign, and you can play it with or without the war, however you choose. But it's really neat that it's the kickoff of the war. Mongoose, I have been complaining for a long, long time. Mongoose doesn't give us enough sample NPCs or examples of maybe a group of NPCs, some thugs or something like that. Well, they cure it. Whoops, sorry about that. They cure that in this adventure. There's lots of NPCs. There's lots of different groups you can interact with or have combat with or whatever within this through the course of the adventure. So Mongoose is really on their game. I think they're doing a great job. I'm very excited about Fifth Frontier War coming out later in March. We'll have to see if that lands or not, but Mongoose is usually fairly good on their schedule. So the Fifth Frontier War, the old stuff, these are available on DriveThruRPG or through Far Future Enterprises, Mark Miller's site. You can get these issues and read all the Traveler News Service articles on it and all the exciting stuff, or you can just wait and have it be all new to you if you're newer to Traveler. I'm excited about having lived this and now living this. I'm really excited to be back at the beginning for me of Traveler, and I'm really excited to see what Traveler does with it, what Mongoose does with it. The idea of players actually being able to affect the course of the war, and Mongoose has already said they are not going to be bound by what's been written before about the war. I think that's neat. If you're going to retell a story, then I have no problem if you want to retell it with some reasonable changes and even some reasonable outcomes based on your changes. I have no issue with that. They're doing that in a lot of movies these days. The current adaptation movies of Dune spring to mind. I have not seen the second yet. I'm probably going this weekend, but I have seen the first and I loved it. And Dune is just one of my absolute favorite science fiction novels. And the adaptation so far has been fine. So I'm excited to see something else that I love from way long ago, over 40 years ago, coming forward in Traveler. Interesting note on this, I remember buying the war issue for the princely sum of $4. That was about what I was making an hour at the time. And I was not a regular buyer of the Journal of the Traveler's Aid Society because the early 80s I had video games to play and comic books to buy, a girlfriend to date, car to repair, things like that. So this was not always high on my priority. I would buy Traveler Adventures from Game Designers Workshop before I would actually buy Journal of the Traveler's Aid Society. But I did pick up ones that look interesting, and this, of course, is one of them. So for me, personally, it's an exciting time. I am not going to go through the history of the war and what happened here or anything like that, mostly because that's been covered in other places, and it's also something that I'm not really able to do at this time. I still have a limit on my time, so the research needed to do that properly is beyond me at the moment. But I did want to share my personal excitement about becoming re-involved in the Fifth Frontier War from my earliest Traveler days, and the idea that maybe the game we played way back in the early 80s, maybe that command crew and ship did make a difference. It's just an interesting thought, and it's one that's been on my mind. So there you have it. So there you go, a personal look at the Fifth Frontier War from somebody who was there when it started. And let me know what you think. Let me know how excited you are, or maybe you're not. Maybe you don't want big war events. And maybe you don't want something that just happens to you. You want to be involved, which is what I'm excited about. And if you are excited about it, I do recommend Whispers on the Abyss. This is a very good adventure mini campaign. Doesn't have to be involved with the Fifth Frontier War. You can set it anytime during really the Golden Age or even the Rebellion era if you really want to. But it's I think it's better served as the prelude to the Fifth Frontier War. So there you have it. I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for watching today on page 121. If you have any comments, please leave them below. Let me know what you thought about the Fifth Frontier War back in the day and now. And that's it for today. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.